The Tolkien Road, Episode 180, Lord of the Rings TV, Second Age Deep Dive, Akallabêth Reread, Part 4. Hello everyone, welcome to Episode 180 of The Tolkien Road. This is John. Greta, how you doing?
Hey, I'm good. How are you?
I'm good.
Awesome.
So on this episode, we are continuing we're really completing our reread of Akallabêth and discussion thereof, as we have been on this series of Second Age Deep Dive episodes for a while now. So probably got a few more in store for you. Maybe finish out, the year, really kind of rounding out the major themes of the Second Age and major readings of the Second Age. We'll likely be reading of the Rings of Power in the Third Age, which is, of course, the last chapter in the Silmarillion, the book, the Silmarillion, and that, even though it's called the Third Age of the Rings of Power in the Third Age, it still has a lot to say about the Second Age, which Akallabêth doesn't cover. So that's kind of our plan going forward.
Sounds good.
Mailbag episode. We will be getting to that soon. It'll probably be our next episode, actually. So, hey, keep it coming. And we've got a lot to get to there. I know lots of people have sent us notes over the last few months. And so, I do apologize that we haven't gotten back to you on those yet, but we will be here soon. And so that's the plan. We are not ignoring you. We're just kind of keeping it all in one place for a great mailbag episode.
A super duper
indeed
mailbag episode.
Indeed. Hey, special thanks to our newest patrons, Susan, Carter, and James. Just the name James.
Just name James.
That's right.
Like the band. Awesome.
So,
thank you guys.
Yeah, sometimes when I look deep in your eyes, I swear I can see your soul.
Good.
Yeah. James. Anyway.
Yeah. That's not the James lyric I would have chosen, but it's fine.
What would you say something?
No, I would have been, sit down.
Oh, sit down.
Sit down. Sit down. And
sit down.
Sit
down.
Instead
of shut up.
Exactly.
Sit down.
Sit down.
Yeah. Special thanks to Susan and James.
Yes. Thank you guys
for becoming patrons.
Mm-hmm.
You too can become a patron, and we would highly appreciate it if you would, in order to support this podcast. So you can head on over to patreon.com/TolkienRoad and pledge $1 or more per episode. And you can set a monthly limit. So if all you want to do is $1 per month for us, that's perfectly fine. We always appreciate more. But if that's the most you can give, we understand, and we'll take any little bit that you can give to support. So
Word.
Thank you. And by the way, you do get some perks associated with that. 40 bonus videos and other freebies that come out, new episodes early. So for those of you who are patrons, you will get this episode today right after we record it, as opposed to everybody else who will get it on Monday when it's released on our normal podcast feed. So, and there is a special podcast feed that you can add to your podcatcher for patrons only, so that you don't have to be listen to it in some weird format, but you can just actually add the feed to your podcatcher and listen to it like it's any other podcast. So that's pretty cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Like hot off the press release.
Indeed.
That's very cool.
All right. So let's talk about Akallabêth.
Let's do it.
Let's finish it up. Mm-hmm. So when we left off, Sauron had, of course, come to Numenor. He had been taken prisoner back to Numenor, really of his own will, and Ar-Pharazôn, was thinking he was all cool because he had defeated Sauron and brought him back. I wonder if they can hear the background noise.
I'm wondering that too.
of our boys outside playing their imaginary baseball game, going crazy.
So they're really getting into it.
Yeah,
really. I think someone just made a really big play.
Yeah,
may have saved the game actually.
Yeah. Well, when the actual baseball season's over, you gotta do it yourself.
You gotta. I know, because there's nothing on TV. Yeah. Nothing in the real world happening. Baseball related.
Yeah.
So yeah, you gotta dig deep.
You gots to. You just gots to. All right. So Sauron is now in Numenor, And basically, our last episode was concerned with the portion of the of Akallabêth where he is corrupting Ar-Pharazôn and the rest of the Númenorians. And eventually what it winds up becoming is he creates this temple. It's really a temple dedicated to Melkor, right? And he starts conducting human sacrifices there.
Yeah, that's unfortunate.
So pretty horrible stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty horrible stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a guy like Sauron, a creature like Sauron, he's always going to find a way to get the best of you. He might let you think you won, but he's going to find a way, right?
Because he's
with
crafty
you mere mortals.
like that.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's where we left off?
That's where we left off.
Okay.
It says, thereafter the fire and smoke went up without ceasing, for the power of Sauron daily increased. And in that temple, with spilling of blood and torment and great wickedness, men made sacrifice to Melkor that he should release them from death. And most often from among the faithful they chose their victims. Yet never openly on the charge that they would not worship Melkor, the giver of freedom. Rather was cause sought against them that they hated the king and were his rebels, or that they plotted against their kin, devising lies and poisons. These charges were for the most part false, yet those were bitter days, and hate brings forth hate. But even in all this, the real wish of the Númenorians to be relieved of death did not depart from the land. In fact, it was became even worse, right? Like the shadow of death became even greater upon the land.
They're sacrificing humans. How could it not?
Well, exactly, but that's not what they're thinking. They're like, well, if we can just sacrifice enough of these other humans, then maybe we won't have to experience death as in such a horrible way, or even at all, right?
So they're thinking of them
calculus.
as like a scapegoat, kind of.
Yeah.
Like they can kind of burn up all of their fears of
totally.
death by putting them on those they're sacrificing.
Totally, yeah. The faith will become scapegoats, for the rest of the Númenorian society. And it says that death actually came sooner and more often and in many dreadful guises. For whereas aforetime men had grown slowly old and had laid them down in the end to sleep, when they were weary at last of the world, now madness and sickness assailed them. So instead of dying kind of a pleasant death at the end of the life, like I've lived a good and happy life, and it's now time for me to fall asleep, right? It's like madness, sickness, fear, all these things, right? Like think about how you would prefer to die.
I think we talked about this in the last episode.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, sorry if I'm...
No. I'm just saying it's...
Excuse me for hitting on a topic again. Sorry.
Well, no. Yeah. You know what? Apology not accepted.
Okay, well, I'm going to move on.
But yeah.
Well, you won't be invited to the pancake social next Saturday.
I don't even like pancakes.
Well, waffles.
I don't like
We're
waffles
having waffles
either.
instead. Bacon.
I was just gonna say I only like bacon. Well, all right, you got me.
Okay. So in this section, really, here's the highlights. Sauron, he delivers this speech to Ar-Pharazôn against the Valar. And then we learn about Amandil, who is the leader of the faithful, and he seeks to follow Eärendil's example. Amandil gives special instructions to his son Elendil about what he's supposed to do. And then these kind of ominous clouds start gathering over Numenor. And then Ar-Pharazôn's fleet sails into the west in order to try to take Valinor by force. And that leads to the end, really, the destruction of Numenor. But
Eärendil doesn't go with them.
Yeah.
Is that right? Amandil and... Oh, sorry.
I'm just trying to get, like, I trained Greta to speak, like, directly into the microphone because she has a quieter voice than I do. And now she speaks into it, but I've turned up the gain on her so that she can sit back and relax a little bit, but she still wants to sit, like, right into the microphone.
So I'm just not clear on how much I can relax.
I'll tell you if you need to move forward.
Okay, so can I, like, actually put my back against the chair?
Well, not too far, but, like, that's probably too far.
That's too far.
Yeah.
Okay.
Whatever.
All right. Well, we'll get it figured out at some point. Yeah. So Amandil and Eärendil,
Eärendil.
They are members of the faithful.
Yes. Well, Eärendil was he was at the end of the first age. You're thinking of? Are you thinking of Elendil?
Oh, maybe. Oh, yes. Well, who's this. Who did you just mention?
Amandil, and then Elendil, right? But Amandil wants to be like Eärendil. Well, we'll get there. I'm just giving an overview of what we're covering. Like that's all so we'll get back to that specifically.
Okay.
So don't jump ahead on me.
Okay, fine.
The first thing I wanted to hit on was Sauron's speech against the Valar. So, for all of kind of the evil that's coming upon, that's descending upon Numenor in this time, it doesn't really do much to sway Ar-Pharazôn because he's under the influence of Sauron. The years passed, and the king felt the shadow of death approach as his days lengthened, and he was filled with fear and wrath. Now came the hour that Sauron had prepared and long had awaited. And Sauron spoke to the king, saying that his strength was now so great that he might think to have his will in all things, and be subject to no command or ban. And Sauron said to Ar-Pharazôn, "The Valar have possessed themselves of the land where there is no death, and they lie to you concerning it, hiding it as best they may because of their avarice, and their fear lest the kings of men should wrest from them the deathless realm, and rule the world in their stead. And though doubtless the gift of life unending is not for all, but only for such as are worthy, being men of might and pride and great lineage, yet against all justice is it done that this gift, which is his due, should be withheld from the King of Kings, Ar-Pharazôn, mightiest of the sons of the earth, to whom Manwë alone can be compared, if even he. But great kings do not brook denials, and take what is their due." So Sauron delivers this pretty epic speech to Ar-Pharazôn, and that really is designed to get his pride all worked up and say, look, the Valar have been holding back on you, right? You could have eternal life, right? You could have immortality.
It's sounding kind of familiar.
But the Valar don't want to give it to you.
Yep.
Right? Mm-hmm. The Valar like having you mortal because they can keep all the power for themselves and rule the world. And they know that if you try to take power from them, they lose power. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah.
That's Sauron's whole speech, his temptation towards Ar-Pharazôn.
Because he's telling them that if they give you what you want, mm-hmm. you will eventually be like them.
Right.
And they don't want that.
Yeah, I think you're alluding to the to the first few chapters of Genesis.
Yes.
And that's what you're trying to allude to?
That's what I'm trying to allude to. I mean, it's not obviously word for word, but it's the same general idea.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that's just how the devil works.
Definitely some parallels there.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and Sauron he's gotten to know Ar-Pharazôn well enough to know that he can manipulate him in this way. Mm-hmm. So
yeah, and Ar-Pharazôn totally falls for it.
Totally.
So
Ar-Pharazôn, being besotted, walking under the shadow of death, listens to Sauron, and he starts planning to make this war upon the Valar. We switch over to looking at Amandil, and Amandil basically sees all this coming, and even though Ar-Pharazôn is not initially like telling everybody that this is his plan, Amandil picks up on it, and so he tells Elendil, his son, "The days are dark, and there is no hope for men, for the faithful are few. Therefore I am minded to try that counsel which our forefather Eärendil took of old, to sail into the west, be there ban or no, and to speak to the Valar, even to Manwë himself, if may be, and beseech his aid ere all is lost." So Amandil, even though he has no reason to suspect that it'll work, other than just the fact that Eärendil had success with it, mm-hmm. he plans to try to go into the west in order to appeal to the Valar for their aid, right, for their rescue from Sauron and really from Ar-Pharazôn at this point. The one drawback for Amandil is that he doesn't have a Silmarillion. Right?
Yeah,
I'm sorry, he doesn't have a Silmaril, right?
Right.
That was kind of a thing that Eärendil had in his favor, because even before Eärendil, others in the first age had tried to sail into the west as Morgoth was growing more powerful. Others had tried to sail into the west to get the aid of the Valar, but they never returned. And it was only Eärendil, who had the Silmaril, right, Beren and Lúthien's Silmaril, that was able to actually get into Valinor, appeal to the Valar, and get their aid against Morgoth.
Right.
So, yeah, unfortunately, Amandil has no Silmaril, and so we can kind of guess that this probably won't work.
But at least he's willing to try.
But he's going to try, and he's like, if I've got to give my life in order to, even if it's just on a chance to save what what few I can, then so be it.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
He says, let's see. Elendil says, are you going to betray the king, Ar-Pharazôn? For you know well the charge that they make against us, that we are traitors and spies, and that until this day it has been false. And Amandil says, if I thought that Manwë needed such a messenger, I would betray the king. For there is but one loyalty from which no man can be absolved in heart for any cause. But it is for mercy upon men and their deliverance from Sauron the deceiver that I would plead, since some at least have remained faithful. And as for the ban, I will suffer in myself the penalty, lest all my people should become guilty. So there's a little bit of this. I can't help but read this and think of maybe we mentioned this in the last episode, but I'm the king's good servant, but God's first, right?
Thomas More. Yeah.
Thomas More's saying, or at least his saying in A Man for All Seasons. So there's something of that here with Amandil, right? He's willing to become a martyr in this, right? For the sake of the greater good.
Yeah.
But he has a different plan for Elendil and the rest of their followers, the faithful, right? And that's for them to be ready to go, be in their boats, their ships, ready to go, sail into the east if need be. So that's the plan. Amandil will be setting out, even though he's not telling anybody. He's not making it known that he's going to try and go into the west. He basically tells Elendil to have everybody else ready to go into the east, whoever's able and willing to go.
Just as a kind of a last resort.
Yeah.
Like escape.
Right.
From the punishment that would be awaiting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so hold you ever in readiness, for the end of the world that we have known is now at hand. So Amandil set sail on a small ship at night and steered first eastward, and they went about and passed into the west. And he took with him 3 servants dear to his heart, and never again were they heard of by word or sign in this world, nor is there any tale or guess of their fate. Men could not a second time be saved by any such embassy, and for the treason of Numenor there was no easy absolving. So, too bad for gave it the old college try, but didn't work.
Yeah.
So, or at least nothing was accomplished that we're aware of. And
right.
Maybe he bought a little bit of extra time, for the rest of them, but we just don't know.
Okay, forgive me if this is something I should know.
Mm-hmm.
But why wouldn't it have worked?
What?
I mean, was he just refused by the Valar? Or like what? I know that it says that he's never heard from again. Like you said, there's nothing. He accomplished nothing that we know of. But why didn't it work? I mean, was he captured or?
We don't know. I think it's more of a reason why did it work for Eärendil, right?
But didn't for Amandil.
And again, I think it's because of the Silmaril that it worked for Eärendil, right? Because there's others who had tried to sail into the west for aid. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, it just kind of strikes me as like, when you think of the Valar, and I mean, clearly they're not a Iluvatar, but they were created by a Iluvatar. And you think about mercy being the defining characteristic of our God, whom the Iluvatar is, kind of meant to be a representation of. I don't know. I'm having a hard time wrapping my brain around why, like, his effort wouldn't have been rewarded, regardless of the fact that he didn't have a Silmaril. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like he should have been successful. Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think certainly for any of us, it's kind of like, why wouldn't this, appeal to the result in the aid of the Valar in a different way, right?
Right.
And all we can really do is say, like, because it wasn't the will of Iluvatar.
Wasn't the will, yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's all you can really be left with. And, it's a very similar conundrum to what we face often in this world, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yeah, it's true.
You can think about, like, well, why didn't God somehow intervened to prevent World War II, right? Where all these people died.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And at the end of the day, like, we just don't know. We don't know without, like, in this life, the reasons for that, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, that gets into the whole, like, issue of theodicy, right? Like, why does God allow this evil to happen, right? And yeah, I mean, I don't want to get into a huge.
Yeah, I don't want
want to get into
either.
A huge,
I
like,
was just
theological rabbit trail on that. We, you know, I know the answers that I've found to be appealing in that, but even so, in this life, like, we can't ultimately answer that question, right? In a final and definitive way,
right. Yeah.
Right.
Right. No, I totally get that. I was just sharing that, you know, this is how I feel.
No, it's a good question.
This.
I mean, that's the way we probably should feel. I mean, that's like that is the question.
Yeah, but it's not fair.
Yeah.
I mean, think about, was it Abraham with his bargaining with God, or was Abraham? You know, and he basically talks him down to one, right? For one righteous person, I will turn away my wrath, right? So it's like, well, here's you know, Amandil. Here's your one righteous person.
Right.
Yep. No dice.
Yeah.
So anyway.
I mean, yeah.
You're
right.
Yeah. I did not mean to, like, hijack the conversation. It was on my brain.
In this particular case, it'd be more interesting to me to ask Tolkien, like, why he constructed the story. You know, I wish we could go back and ask him more about that, right?
Sure.
I think we deal with something when I think about, for example, the Lord of the Rings, right? All this stuff happens. At the end of the day, all of this is background to Lord of the Rings, right? To the story of Lord of the Rings,
yes.
Right? Sauron, obviously, the main bad guy there. And what do we gain as a result of that whole endeavor? Well, a lot is lost, but we gain the beautiful heroism, right, of the few, right, of Frodo and Sam and of the others, right? The self-sacrificial heroism, right? And even then, though, right, there's the whole question of, like, but all of that for this, like, couldn't there have been an easier way, right? And at the end of the day, it's like that's the sort of philosophical pondering that you arrive at with these questions.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, and
these stories.
And that's a big, you know, I think that's a big draw for Tolkien's works.
Well, and you think about, like, we bring it back to our own history in World War II, right? Just as an example. But you think about great acts of heroism within that, you know, but it's like, at what cost, too?
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So
what do you have to show for it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. I know it's a big topic. And
this is the world we live in. Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think we were talking about this at book club the other day, but just in a nutshell, you know, it's just like, everybody wants the happy ending. Like, that's what we want. But most of the time, that's not what you get in real life. And I think that's what makes authors like, you know, the works of Tolkien or Oscar Wilde or Graham Greene, you know, you don't, like, you kind of left with a little bit of a sinking feeling in your stomach. But then when you talk about it and you think over it, you're like, well, that's life. You know, we don't live in a fairy tale world, you know? So,
or do we?
Well,
like, that's what Tolkien actually argues, right? Is that we do live in a fairy tale world.
Right. But then you get into his definition of what a fairy tale actually is. And it's not the common perception.
Well, right. But yeah, his whole thing is that the fairy tale is not like the, you know,
not the man on the white horse coming in to swoop away the princess and they live happily ever after.
Well, maybe, but more about, like, it's the perilous realm. Like, it's the story that takes place in the perilous realm where there is so much at stake. And is there ultimately, like, the question is, what is the end of the story, right? Like, to me, it brings me back to Sam's line when he wakes up in where is it? I think he wakes up in Minas Tirith, and he sees Gandalf, who he thought was dead, and he's like, "Is everything sad going to come untrue?" Right? Like that's the big question, right?
Yeah.
Is everything sad going to come untrue?
Right.
I mean, that's just, I love the fact that it comes out of Sam's mouth because, like, he's just kind of this simple guy, but it's like that is the ultimate question.
It is.
Like, that's
It
the ultimate
is.
question for Tolkien, I think, right? Is everything sad in this world somehow going to be so resolved that in a way it's not even true anymore, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That is the question.
Like we'll look back on it and just think to ourselves, like, it really was all worth it, right? For the good that was gained, it really was all worth it.
Right.
Like,
even if we don't see that good in the here and now,
yeah,
you just have to trust that somehow, some way, it's going to be used.
Can that miracle can that miracle be worked?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And as Christians, we have to say yes.
Well,
Ultimately.
that is. I mean, we do as Christians. Like that's what you're signing up for when you're a Christian,
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
even though, like you said, we don't see here that any good came from Amandil's quest, we just don't know. You know?
Yeah.
I mean, we don't know. Even though we can't see it, that doesn't mean it's not there or won't be there or won't have some kind of effect that eventually leads to everything sad coming untrue.
Right. Yeah, and you can't put behind you in all of this, you can't put behind you the reality that there was a lot of evil stuff going on in Numenor, like really horrible evil stuff.
Yeah.
And so there is that sense in all of this that, like, man, there's some, they kind of, in a way, they brought this wrath upon themselves, right?
They did. They did.
They brought this wrath upon themselves. So anyway, we spent a lot.
I
I mean, it's good. It's a great conversation, but not, it was a very spontaneous one, not one I was planning on having on this topic. So,
yeah.
But good stuff. So
Yeah,
let's
definitely.
continue though.
Okay.
All right. So we've been on Amandil's fate. I do want to make note that the Elendil and the people with him, and all the stuff they gathered to bring out of Numenor, they brought the seven stones, the Palantirs, and then the young tree, the scion of Nimloth the Fair, that Isildur was responsible for saving. We talked about in the last episode. So just a couple of key artifacts that were brought out of Numenor there. In all this time, like the weather had always in Numenor been pretty nice, and like especially coming in from the west, they would like kind of get this like sweet fragrance from the undying lands. But now it started to change, and the sky is darkened. There's storms of rain and hail and violent winds, and ever and anon a great ship of the Numenorians would founder and return not to haven, though such a grief had not till then befallen them since the rising of the star. And then you get these great clouds, like shaped as eagles, and then you have eagles bringing lightning beneath their wings, and they're like, uh-oh, we're about to pay for this. Some of them are about to pay for this, and others are like, shaking their fists at the heavens, like there's the Valar, and all their jealousy against us, right?
So some do repent, or they would repent. So these eagles, does this have anything to do with Amandil's?
I mean, maybe
into the west?
So maybe.
Okay.
Maybe so. There's some of this,
Yeah.
And but there's no clear indication that it does.
Right. It doesn't come right out and say it.
So the lords of the west have plotted against us. They strike first. The next blow shall be ours. These words the king himself spoke, but they were devised by Sauron. And the lightnings increase so much during this time that they start like they start like hitting men like just randomly out in the open, and it actually, one of them hits the dome of the temple and tears it asunder. And all of that, you've got this great image of Sauron like standing there in the temple, like kind of laughing about it all, right?
Yeah.
And he kind of defies the lightning, and in that hour, people start worshiping him as a god, right?
Because he's he's able to stand up against.
Seems
to be.
Yeah.
Yeah, it appears that he's able to go toe to toe with the eagles and the lightning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You get smoke issuing from the Meneltarma, from the Pillar of Heaven, and Ar-Pharazôn presses on with his armament. So things are getting ugly, really ugly in Numenor. Mm-hmm. Chickens coming home to roost.
So Ar-Pharazôn is on his mission at this point, yes?
No, not yet.
He's just preparing.
Now he's heading out. So
I see. Okay.
It says, in that time the fleets of the Numenorians darkened the sea upon the west of the land, and they were like an archipelago of 1,000 isles. So a huge fleet. Their masts were as forest upon the mountains, and their sails like a brooding cloud, and their banners were golden and black. And all things waited upon the word of Ar-Pharazôn. And Sauron withdrew into the inmost circle of the temple, and men brought him victims to be burned. So it's like Sauron's going to stick. He's like, I'll stay here, and I'll keep burning human sacrifice victims in order to ensure our victory.
How very big of you, Sauron.
Right.
Yes.
Sauron really hates the Dunedain.
You think?
Yeah. So.
Yikes.
And then we get eagles coming out of the west. And then Ar-Pharazôn and all this hardens his heart, and they set sail. They set sail for the Undying Lands. Yeah, so
take a breath. Okay,
yeah, just a lot of
action.
A lot of action, and the action continues.
Mm-hmm.
And they continue, and they break the ban of the Valar. Right, they sail into the forbidden seas to wrest from the deathless, to wrest everlasting life from within the circles of the world. So they get into
to wrest everlasting life.
Yeah,
it's so ironic to me. Like it's something they could just take.
Yeah, well, that's what Sauron's told them.
I know. It's just he's totally brainwashed them.
Yeah, the truth is that a mortal entering into the Undying Lands still dies. Right.
Yes. A
mortal entering into the Undying Lands still dies because the Valar don't have any ability to grant immortality. Like they don't have the ability to grant immortality to a mortal, right?
Mm-hmm. Only a Iluvatar can do that.
Right. Only a Iluvatar.
Right.
Only a Iluvatar can do that. So,
so spoiler alert, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
You won't be resting anything. Ar-Pharazôn. I can't say his name.
Ar-Pharazôn. Yes.
Okay.
So they come. The big fleet, Ar-Pharazôn's fleet, comes to the Undying Lands. They see Tol Eressëa and Avalonia, the first kind of city that can even be seen dimly from Numenor in some places. And they surround that land, and they continue on, and they hit the actual land of Aman and the coast of Valinor, and they surround the city of Tanaquetil. And it says, Pride was now Ar-Pharazôn's master, and at last he left his ship and strode upon the shore, claiming the land for his own, if none should do battle for it. And a host of the Numenorians encamped in might about Tuna, whence all the Eldar had fled.
I want to ask Tolkien why he called it Tuna. It just seems so like
I'm sure there's like old Anglo-Saxon or Finnish
sure, yes.
Words that that preceded what we think of as tuna fish. So,
or what we think of the big tuna.
The big tuna.
Thanks to Andy Bernard.
Yeah. So
it just always makes me chuckle every time I read it.
Yeah. Well, it's actually not tuna. It's tuna because it's got the
because of
mark.
the okay. Tuna.
I think.
Ooh.
That's what I'd say. You're reading it wrong. That's what Tolkien would say.
Okay.
It's like
You're probably
completely
right.
different words.
Yeah.
Completely different words.
I'm sure. Absolutely. Yes.
So, Ar-Pharazôn, he's there. He's like, here I am. I'm going to take this place. Even though he's like, he's kind of scared. He's like, what am I doing? He's like, he's got that feeling of like, I'm going to do this. But all the while he's thinking like, what am I doing? Mm-hmm. Right.
And why am I doing it? And this is actually a good idea.
Pride has become my master.
Mm-hmm.
And so Manwë upon the mountain calls upon Iluvatar, and for that time the Valar laid down the governance of Arda. Iluvatar shows forth his power, and he changed the fashion of the world, and a great chasm opened in the sea between Numenor and the Deathless Lands, and the waters flowed down into it, and the noise and smoke of the cataracts went up to heaven, and the world was shaken. And all the fleets of the Númenorians were drawn down into the abyss, and they were drowned and swallowed up forever. But Ar-Pharazôn the king and the mortal warriors that had set foot upon the land of Aman were buried under falling hills. There it is said that they lie imprisoned in the caves of the forgotten until the last battle and the day of doom. So the fleets fall into the great chasm that's opened by Ilúvatar in the sea, and Ar-Pharazôn and his armies that are on the land are buried under falling hills. So much for those guys.
Yeah, all that work, and they're just poof, gone.
Yeah. In an instant.
It's like, in an instant.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't even take very long.
So Aman and Eärendil of the Eldar were taken away and removed beyond the reach of men forever. So no longer. What's interesting is that basically, the Undying Lands were an actual part of the world until this time, right? We're an actual part of Arda. But after this, they're actually lifted up out of the world. The world is made round, right? And they're lifted up out of the world so that you can't just get to them by sailing to them, right?
So there's like an actual divide,
right,
that cannot be crossed.
Right, exactly. And it's only given to certain, really, to the Eldar to be able to pass into it now, and it's kind of by a sort of magic, because it's like you reach a certain point and you find the straight road, what's called the straight road. We'll see it called that here in just a minute.
It's kind of like platform, what is it? 9.5. What is it?
Oh, whatever. Yeah,
Harry Potter thing. I'm embarrassed that I can't remember the number.
It's something and a half or 3/4 or something.
3/4. That's it. It's something 3/4.
I can't even remember.
Guys, I'm sorry. I am a Harry Potter fan. But it's like it's a special gift that only the predestined or those
allowed. That's not the predestined, to those allowed, right?
To what?
Basically to the Eldar, right?
Right. For those who were created for such a purpose.
Right.
Yeah.
For immortality. So
right.
So Aman and Eärendil of the Eldar removed beyond the reach of men forever. Andor, the land of gift, Numenor of the kings, Elena of the star of Elendil was utterly destroyed, and Ilúvatar cast back the great seas west of Middle Earth and the empty lands east of it, and new lands and new seas were made, and the world was diminished, for Valinor and Eärendil were taken from it into the realm of hidden things. Numenor, like most of the people in Numenor, were lost, including Tar-Míriel, the queen. Actually, she was kind of a good person,
right?
But it was too late that she tried to ascend the steep ways in the Meneltarma, right, to make an appeal, I guess, to Ilúvatar. For the waters overtook her, and her cry was lost in the roaring of the wind. So, but the Elendil and his sons, right, Isildur and Isildur and Anarion, are spared. Though it's really pretty scary for them as they're, as they escape this, because they don't like sail away. Like they the masts of their ship get snapped. And it's like the waters are like hunting the unhappy men like straws upon the water, right? 9 ships there were, 4 for Elendil, 3 for Isildur, 2 for Anarion, and they fled before the black gale out of the twilight of doom into the darkness of the world. And the deeps rose beneath them in towering anger, and waves like unto mountains, moving with great caps of writhen snow, bore them up amid the wreckage of the clouds. And after many days cast them away upon the shores of Middle-earth, and all the coasts and seaward regions of the western world suffered great change and ruin in that time. For the seas invaded the lands, and shores foundered, and ancient isles were drowned, and new isles were uplifted, and hills crumbled, and rivers were turned into strange courses.
So this could be one of the, good things that came out of Amandil's quest. I mean, it even says here whether or no it were that Amandil came indeed to Valinor, and Manwë hearkened to his prayer by grace of the Valar. His sons were spared.
Hold on. Right. So maybe the salvation of Elendil and his sons was part of that, right?
Could be. Yeah. But it says it was by grace. We just don't know.
Yeah.
What the source of that grace or how it was earned.
So after
given.
this, Elendil and his sons founded kingdoms in Middle-earth. Of course, one of those being Gondor, the other being Arnor, and that's how where we pick up. So this is not the end of the Second Age, by the way. The Second Age continues past the story of the downfall of Numenor, and really the end of the Second Age is with the last alliance of men and elves, which happens a little later. But for Sauron here, right? He had actually been appealing to look at. He had been looked like a beautiful man, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Up until this point. But here he is, and it says, sitting his black seat in the midst of the temple, had laughed when he heard the trumpets of Ar-Pharazôn sounding for battle, and again he had laughed when he heard the thunder of the storm, and a third time, even as he laughed at his own thought, thinking that he would do now in the world, being rid of the Dunedain forever, he was taken in the midst of his mirth, and his seat and his temple fell into the abyss. But Sauron was not of mortal flesh, and though he was robbed now of that shape, he falls down into the abyss himself, but he doesn't die. His spirit doesn't die because he has an immortal spirit, and his flesh is just kind of a suit he puts on.
Right.
So, but the problem for him is that he can never again appear fair in the eyes of men. As to why that is not exactly clear. Maybe it's kind of the curse upon him from here on out for his evil deeds. But he returns on a black wind over the sea to Mordor. It takes up the ring and Barad-dûr, and he dwells there dark and silent until he wrought himself a new guise, an image of malice and hatred made visible. And the eye of Sauron the Terrible few can endure.
So he's not gone. He's just changed.
He's not gone. He's definitely not gone. He's just changed. And so that's kind of the end of what we have here, right? We have the outcome: Numenor gone, Ar-Pharazôn and his armies destroyed utterly. Elendil and a small group of Numenorians come to Middle-earth and establish their kingdoms, right? And probably there's Numenorians that are in, Middle-earth already because they had all those outposts, right, and kind of different cities the Numenorians had built on the coast and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But they established their kingdoms of Arnor and Gondor, and then Sauron returns to Mordor, and the Second Age is not done yet, but that's the end of the story of Numenor. There's kind of a little epilogue here, which tells us the Meneltarma was not drowned forever, but rose again above the waves. And this is kind of a legend, right? It's just a legend among the exiles that it's like the top of the Meneltarma, because it was this special place hallowed to Ilúvatar, still exists somewhere above the waters. And that Sauron
even though
never actually
Numenor's
defiled
gone.
it.
Sorry.
Right. It's like the last remnant of Numenor.
Gotcha.
Right.
Okay. What did you say about Sauron defiling it?
Well, Sauron never did.
Oh,
right?
he never did.
Never did.
And that's
defile
why it's still able to stand.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then their descendants, right? The descendants of the seed of Eärendil would afterwards seek for it, right, to see if they could find it, because it was said that if they could stand upon it, they might catch a glimpse of the deathless land. Because their hearts are still set westward, right? Their hearts are still set into the west to want this goodness, this light that exists there. Let's see. So the Dunedain, this longing never leaves them. They're still great mariners, but the straight road is closed to them, right? All roads are now bent, as it says. But for the Eldar, right, it says that the kings of men knew that the world was indeed made round, and yet the Eldar were permitted still to depart and to come to the ancient west and to Avalanye, if they would. Therefore, the lore masters of men said that a straight road must still be for those that were permitted to find it. And they taught that while the new world fell away, the old road on the path of the memory of the west still went on, as it were a mighty bridge invisible that passed through the air of breath and of flight, and traversed Ilmen, which flesh unaided cannot endure, until it came to Tol Eressëa, the lonely isle, and maybe even beyond to Valinor, where the Valar still dwell and watch the unfolding of the story of the world. So, tales and rumors arose along the shores of the sea concerning mariners and men forlorn upon the water, who by some fate or grace or favor of the Valar had entered in upon the straight way, and seen the face of the world sink below them, and so had come to the lamplit quays of Avalanye, or verily to the last beaches on the margin of Aman, and there had looked upon the white mountain, dreadful and beautiful, before they died. So there's these legends that persist among the descendants, Elendil and his descendants, that some some men who are mariners and get in trouble at sea and are seemingly lost, that this is kind of a little gift that's given to them in the last moment of their life, is to be able to enter into the Deathless Land and glimpse upon it for a moment. So
that's beautiful.
Here you have this kind of legend of all that. So
that's good.
Yeah.
Real good.
All right. Well, that is Akallabêth. So, I mean, I look back, the whole reason we embarked upon reading this and we're doing this Second Age deep dive is to say, like, what could the Lord of the Rings show really have in store? Mm-hmm. Lord of the Rings on Prime, the upcoming show. I mean, I think there's, this. I suspect that a good part of this story, and really maybe chiefly the story of Ar-Pharazôn and the downfall of Numenor, is going to be very much in focus in all this, right?
I think that's a good prediction.
And I see this as being a very big story and a perfect thing for, I think, what they're hoping to accomplish with it. So, now we're a little more educated about Akallabêth, about these stories, and what might be in store for us on the show.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Good stuff.
Yeah.
I'm excited.
All right. Well, I think that's all we got for this episode. Yeah.
I think you're right. It's a wrap. Yeah.
Hey, send us correspondence at tolkienroadpodcast@gmail.com. And we got to think about what we're doing next, but probably next episode will be a mailbag episode. And then after that, we got some other stuff to think about as far as the Second Age goes. So we'll see what we get to.
Yeah. So stay tuned.
Thanks again to our patrons. You all rock. Al Taylor.
Andrew Herbert.
Andrew Thomas.
Azia Viner.
Austin Broswell.
Bethany Engler.
Brendan Corkery.
Brian Orr.
Caitlin Howell.
Kat Lane.
Chris Loftus.
Chuck Farnung.
Daniel Delaney.
Daniel Peridot.
David Bates.
David Bigwood.
Emilio Perea.
Hunter Johns.
Ish of the Hammer.
James
Applegate.
James Lindberg.
Joe Towns.
John Rice.
Margaret Lyon.
Maria Isabel Giraldo.
Robert Franks.
Robert Sleeth. I can't read. Sorry.
You're too small.
No, it's fine. Robert Sleeth.
Sarah Murphy.
Shannon Stockbridge.
Teresa Colangelo.
Ty Miller.
Tyler Shelley.
Dr. William Hutton.
And Zeke Farmer. And Susan Carter, because I forgot to add her name to this list, so I need to do that. Thanks you all.
Yeah, thank you.
And we appreciate you, and we will talk at you next time.
Yes, we will.
Bye-bye.
Bye, y'all.